I know, this is my third video on a game that not even the devs can be bothered with anymore. But listen, this one is different. This one is about that game without a title that everyone goes absolutely mental for. This one is about what DA4 can gain from Anthem's codebase. As we know from this 11,000 word long article, wait, hold on, 11 bloody thousand words on Anthem. My final exams were shorter than that. That article on a by now dead game is only 39.71% shorter than my girlfriend's bachelor thesis. Mr. Schreier, get to the bloody point, man. Anyway, TLDR of that whole manifesto is that DA4 is sharing an Anthem's codebase, which in and of itself doesn't sound like much, but can potentially tell us a bit about what we can expect of that game we don't know anything about. Something else we know is that the live service aspect of DA4 is being removed, as I was informed of by someone who, for reasons of privacy, I shall only refer to as Mr. J. So what could potentially be used again and end up in Dragon Age 4 that we made use of in Anthem? Let's address the elephant in the sky, as it were. Perhaps the single most fun aspect and best designed feature of Anthem was the flying. It was well polished, the animations were brilliant, and it was all around fun to zip around the map with more or less agile suits, making you feel like either Iron Man on crack or a tank launched at very high speeds. Now it'd be silly to expect that we'd get flying mecha suits in Dragon Age 4. At least I bloody well hope we don't, otherwise I might burst a vessel. So how would they implement a flying mechanic in a fantasy RPG? Spoilers for those that haven't read Last Flight, but griffins are a thing again, and depending on how many there are, how quickly they grow up, and how many years after DAI the next game is set, we might be able to tame one of those oversized mutant chickens for ourselves and fly around on them, and perhaps even into combat. Griffin Riders were a quite prominent thing in DA lore, back when they were still around, so it's not like there isn't precedent for it. Mages could wield magic and hurl fireballs or what have you at enemies to essentially carpet bomb them, while rogues and warriors could use bows and crossbows respectively to just shoot people from the air. From what was written in Last Flight, griffins seem to be quite agile creatures, owing to being based in a fantasy world and also just being cocks on steroids. And while they might not be as nimble as the Interceptor, the flying mechanic would work pretty damn well on them, if you ask me. Which no one is, by the way. Granted, this feature was already a thing in DAI, but in my opinion, Anthem improved upon it a little bit. While in Inquisition the combos were there, they existed and served their purpose, I think Anthem did a fantastic job of telling you what primes them and what detonates them, resulting in a nice gameplay feature to build your character around. As I said, they are a thing in DAI too. If you freeze an enemy and then use abilities such as Shield Bash, they shatter, dealing additional damage to them. In Anthem it is much similar, but you have more combinations. Basically any status effect primes an enemy, be it setting someone aflame, freezing, or coating them in toxic waste by reading them a post from the Dragon Age subreddit. And then any number of other abilities detonates them, such as melee attacks or rockets. The resulting detonation causes quite significant AoE damage, which is not only satisfying to see and hear, but also a viable way to play the game. Implementing the combo system from Anthem in combination with more open skill trees and character customization would allow players to choose their own playstyle in the form of builds for their characters. Similar to what we used to have in DAO, which also had skill combos, albeit not as flashy. Again, there is precedent, as previous titles in the series did it already, so using this updated system would simply improve upon an already existing concept. In this segment, I originally planned to rant and rave about how they made multiplayer and co-op play work in DA4. But with the confirmation of that being removed via an article by Jason Schreier that is fewer than 11,000 words long this time, it doesn't particularly make sense to speculate here. So instead I'll gloss over it and preserve this topic for another time and a different type of media in the near future. If and when that is published, I will tell you on my Twitter, so be sure to check that out. Next slide, please. In every Dragon Age game so far, we've had a sort of central hub, DA2 excluded, since that hub was basically your only location in the game. In DAO you had your camp, from where you could choose your travel destination, speak to companions and shag people. In DII, of course, you had at first some village filled with religious fanatics, and then later on your very own castle, courtesy of a bald genocidal maniac. Point is, you always had a place to call your own, where you can roam around and talk to your mates. The same applies in Anthem. Fort Tarsis is basically just that. A central hub from which you start missions, interact with companions, select your gear and all of that other stuff. This point isn't an Anthem-specific trait that the next game would gain from the codebase, but rather a BioWare thing. They've always given you a centralized hub for your PC. What that hub might look like in DA4, who knows? My guess would be something similar to Fort Tarsis, a small village or hamlet that slowly expands or is restored over time as the story progresses, and more people will be drawn to. This leads to my next point. Open world games in recent times have had a surge, thanks in large parts to Bethesda. In Dragon Age Inquisition, BioWare tried their hands at something like it as well, with marginal success, I'd say. The maps in DAI were fine, but the open world aspect of it was for the most part pointless, since it was all stuffed with filler content such as codex entries or rifts out in the middle of nowhere. In Anthem they went for a different approach. You have missions, and then you have free play. Missions put you at a certain point on the map from which you will travel to the quest destination, leaving you to choose which way you will take there. Free play lets you, as the name implies, roam around the map freely and complete objectives at your own pace. All of these are optional, as story missions are separate from all of that. DA4 might have something similar, a combination of Anthem and DAI. Maps you can roam in free play, but important story missions might still be exclusive, akin to the mission table and main quests in Inquisition. In addition to that, story missions might give you the same limited freedom, ironic, I know, as Anthem, where you can choose your approach, either head on or maybe look around to see what other path you can take. This would give players the option to build their character around their own playstyle of either facing enemies head on or taking a more safe approach from a distance, or perhaps moving to higher positions, or avoiding enemies altogether. In addition to build customization, this could result in higher replayability, and also lead to different outcomes in the story, similar to a system used in the Dishonored games, where the game, and ultimately the ending, responds to your choice of playstyle. This is something that Dragon Age has been progressing towards with each iteration. The difference between DAO and DAI is staggering, not just in terms of graphics and textures, but from a gameplay standpoint too. Combat in DAI is fast-paced and flashy, but not nearly as much as an Anthem. With sharing the same codebase, we can hopefully expect a more fluid and polished combat, more like what we see in Anthem or even akin to Witcher 3's combat, which I consider to be thoroughly enjoyable. Following in line with this less static combat, we could potentially see dodge abilities such as Fate Step or Roll be an upgrade of a baseline dash for every class. Mages get a short distance blink like in Andromeda, while rogues get a quick combat roll. Something they already introduced in Inquisition is AoE basic attacks, albeit that they were linked to a specific type of weapon, like two-handed swords or bladed daggers. In DA4 they could introduce every weapon having a certain AoE range to make them feel more dynamic to use. Something sword and board warriors might be able to look forward to is an enhanced shield charge. Just have a look at this one, they could take straight from Anthem. I have to hand it to them. They made an effort in Inquisition, but in Anthem you can actually experience day and night without them being bound to a specific location. Granted, they are not cycles, since it is pretty much random which one you spawn into, but maybe it is something they will improve upon in DA4, which would also solve the trouble of not having a sense of time passed in the game. I can't be the only one that thought DAI took place in the span of a month, can I? Dynamic time and weather would bring a sense of immersion, and depending on whether your hub really is a village, would make for amazing NPC interaction by giving them a regular schedule for their job, such as when a merchant is available to either browse their wares or burgle during the night. Weather could have an effect on combat and movement. During heavy rain, fire spells would be less efficient, while ice and lightning would gain a bonus to status effects. Movement in melee would be impaired due to slippery ground. In deserts, such as this one, ice spells would have a lower chance of freezing enemies, and when they do, the duration would be reduced. Sadly, all of this is just speculation and wishful thinking. Whether any of what I just said will make it into the finished product, we will have to wait and see. And on that terrible disappointment, thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one or on stream. Also, quick addition here for those interested in cooking, I have started making and publishing an episodic cook booklet, which can be found free of charge in the description below or in the about page of my Twitch stream.